Actually, I'll probably just do an intro later. Let's just start fucking rolling.
Okay. Of
Um, Thank you for taking the time for joining me today. Could you
course.
give the elevator pitch of yourself for the listeners, for anyone who doesn't know you?
Okay. My name's Stuart Locke. I currently reside with my loving wife and our beautiful dog in Jacksonville Beach. I'm Canadian by birth, and I lived in Canada until December 26th of last year. I am the co-owner and founder of Kodiak Barbell. We have 5 coaches under us now. We do powerlifting coaching all across the world. We have clients in 19 countries now, I think. So
Wow.
we've grown, and yeah, I got into lifting because I played football when I was too small. So I decided to lift weights because I needed to gain weight.
Now you say football. Were you football or rugby or both?
Both. So
Okay.
I played 2 years of university football and then 2 years of university rugby, and I was captain of the men's rugby team.
Okay. From
Yeah.
what I understand, too, concussions was an issue.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that was yeah. So I had 5 in my last year of football. I had 5 in 4 months, and the last one was a second impact concussion, which is uh well, it was a traumatic brain injury. So I had to take almost a year off of school. I was on antidepressants because my brain was just
Yeah.
mush. And yeah, it was a fucking hell of a ride. I had to relearn how to read and everything.
Walking, was that all that affected too, or not?
No, so weird. So it was reading, and then I had like insane anxiety.
Mm.
And then the reading part was actually because when I had hit my head, I'd also damaged a bunch of the ocular muscles.
Hmm.
So essentially, like you can think about it as like a really bad strain or sprain in the muscles that cause your eyes to focus. So I had to wear glasses for almost a year, which is weird because I have
Yeah.
better than 20/20.
Wow.
And yeah, just like a lot of like based on where I hit my head, there was certain faculties that were impacted. So even still, like Jem laughs about it, I can't play tic-tac-toe.
Oh,
I cannot, for whatever reason, it's a pattern matching thing.
right.
I can't do it. Like my it just she we literally we went to a weekend away and we were playing tic-tac-toe, and she beat me 20 games in a row. And she's like, "Are you fucking with me?" I'm like, I literally don't know what's going on.
What about like Connect Four? Similar thing, I'm guessing.
Can't do it.
Yeah, there's no the pattern recognition.
Dude,
Interesting.
yes, checkers, anything.
Yeah, right.
I'm
Meanwhile, you can look at a long-term progression in training and do like a micro, macro, meso. You can see all that, no problem. But I
yeah,
guess it's
no
more
issues.
theoretical. It's not so much physically in front of you.
Yeah, and it's a visual thing too.
Right.
There's a certain degree of visual acuity that I lack that
Interesting.
like even if we pack the car for a weekend away, I can't do it. And even like dishwasher, I can't in my
Right.
head, I don't understand where things go.
Well, you just pick your jobs around the house accordingly and away you go.
Or you just run the dishwasher twice, you know?
That's right. That's right. Because Jacksonville, why not?
Exactly. Fuck it.
So the question I want to open up with, just to kind of get a sense as to some life experience for you, is how would you describe your relationship with death? And then as a follow-up to that, have you ever had a near-death experience?
Yeah. So my relationship with death, I think, is um, a little bit. I had a lot of experience with death very early on. So within the span of 5 or 6 years, uh, my grandmother on my mom's side died, and then my grandparents on my dad's side died, and then 3 of my dad's siblings died, and then my billet parents from when I played football, both of them died of small cell lung cancer before the age of 50 within 18 months of each other.
Wow.
So it was a lot of fucking funerals very early on in my life.
What kind of
And
age are we talking?
I think it's we started at 11 or 12.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and finished out at well, maybe 6 years. So yeah, probably 12 to 18. Yeah. So it was, and it's interesting too that my mom was a Sunday school teacher. So like she had a very good um kind of a view on it, which is that like, they're not in pain anymore. This is a good thing.
Right.
Um with regards to near death experiences, I had a couple. I would say that the concussion was pretty bad. Like I had a moment, I don't have memory for about a month after the event. And the only memory I have from that month is I remember I was in the midst of having some kind of seizure, and the athletic therapist was holding my hands, and I'm having this seizure, like laying on the treatment bed in the athletic therapy room. And I asked her, because I was like, my brain felt like it was on fire. And I
Yeah.
was like, am I going to die? And she didn't answer me and then just started crying. And I was like, that's probably not how you should react
Yeah.
to a
That
20-year-old asking you if he's going to die.
that's a strong maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, and also like my brain was such mush after that there was a lot of times where I was like, this for sure totally could be it.
Right.
And other than that, like I had a shitty experience when I was like very young, before conscious memory, of like the lady that would clean our house didn't understand like chemical safety, so she put bleach in a Powerade bottle, and then I drank what I thought was Powerade,
Right.
and so I was fucked up from that, which is also why I don't have gut bacteria. But
Sure. Yeah.
and so I mean, aside from those two, I've been quite lucky. I mean, every car accident I've been in, we were totally fine. So yeah, aside from that, not really.
How did you see or find that the like after that concussion and the seizures on the table, like
Mhm.
did you find there was lasting effects from that in your psyche or in like your emotional body? Did you notice any like weird things that you didn't notice before, or anything lasting even now to this day from that?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that it was the first time I'd ever had to confront the fact that like my identity was just gone. Right. So
Right.
it's like you identify as an athlete for a really, really long time, and then you get a year hold in practice, and you're just a person with a concussion. You can't play football anymore. And
Yeah.
I had a lot of issues for probably about 2 years. I had like pretty significant cognitive deficits, and I would have really low functioning in the morning. So like before noon, I was useless. I'd get up at 9 and I wouldn't get anything done until 1 p.m.
Hmm.
All of my classes were in the afternoon. I was just a fucking wreck. And I also got very, very scared of like anything that could potentially be seen as a concussion, right?
Hmm.
So if I bumped my head getting out of the car, fucking total panic, freak out.
Yeah.
And it was just because like I don't want to go through that again. I hope this isn't that again.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because I would describe you as a highly intelligent person. You're very on the ball. Your memory and recollection of facts is insane, or which I know is a skill in itself. It comes with practice and all these other things too. But that seems like something that comes very naturally to you. And so just to acknowledge the fact that that hasn't always been the case, whether regardless of pre or post concussion or even during, but now fast forwarding all these years to still have that, or has that been a skill that you've had to focus on, or is that just something that seems to
Yeah.
come?
So I mean, I still, my memory is for certain things good, for certain things really bad.
Right.
So I have a whiteboard in my office that if I don't write it down on the whiteboard, I don't remember.
Same.
And
My whole
and it's
wall.
like and it's I definitely didn't have issues with working memory to that point before, but it's
Mhm.
weird, right? Because there's there's memory that's responsible for like how you tie your shoes, and then there's memory that's responsible for like what you did in the last hour. Then there's memory that's responsible for like facts. And it's only some of my memory, like my working memory, is still not good compared to what it was at before. My episode or my I think that's called episodic memory, but and then my like semantic memory where I'm like tying shoes and stuff was never affected.
Mhm.
And then my facts and whatever memory was fine, but it's just little like I couldn't tell you what I did at 2 o'clock this afternoon.
Sure. Well, and that kind of transitions well into too, like I want to talk a lot about religion today. And
Yeah,
that was your major in university, correct?
yeah. I have a major in Abrahamic faiths. Sorry, major in religious studies, specialization in Abrahamic faiths, which is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam.
Right. And so actually, and you said your mother was a Sunday school teacher as well. What role has religion played in your life? And then how has it evolved as you have as a man?
So I wasn't. My mom was a Sunday school teacher until she stopped going to church consistently, which is probably mid 20s.
Right.
So I mean, she's read the Bible front to back probably 5 times. She can quote chapter, verse, everything.
Right.
But I wasn't raised in a religious household, and My dad's not religious. He was raised religious. My mom was raised religious. And there's this interesting cohort of boomers that were like raised religious and then
Hmm.
didn't raise their kids in faith, which I thought was kind of interesting. It's like they
Yeah.
just stopped going to church when their parents stopped making them. Um, and so for me, it was very much I came to Christianity and I came to some semblance of a belief as an adult. It really was. I mean, the first thing was probably that concussion because I was like, okay, well, I'm still here and I could have not been here.
Hmm.
So there must be some kind of reason or some kind of, higher. Because I wasn't open to the idea, even though I was a major, I wasn't open to the idea of like God is controlling my life and God is this powerful, omniscient figure.
Right.
But I was like, there's some reason, right? And the further my life went on, and the more consistently I had bad situations happen or things happen, and I was always seemingly taken care of, and it just seemed more and more improbable that this was just some kind of cosmic happenstance.
Right.
I was like, I can't look at the past 10 years of my life and be like, no, you just got lucky for 10 years in a row every year.
Hmm.
So,
Well, well, I guess my curiosity question then to in my own experience is how would you describe your perception of my life experience? And I guess I'm guessing similarly.
yeah, I mean, the fact that you're fucking here, man. I mean, for me, that's testimony or testament enough. And you obviously you have, there's certain conditions and issues that you still deal with on a daily basis. We talked about that earlier,
Yeah.
but I mean, like, I remember when you were going in for that big heart surgery, we were like, fuck, man. I mean, right? Because you had told
Yeah.
us, you were like, hey, there's a pretty significant chance. It's a non-zero chance that I just don't wake up.
Yeah.
And having seen you grow in also being able to help others through their issues, it's there's this concept in Christianity, which is that I am offering up my suffering in service of others.
Hmm.
And I very much view the difficulties in my life in that way. And it's very easy. I don't want to say easy, but when I view your life and the difficulties that you've gone through that lens and what you've been able to help people with as a result,
Hmm.
I do view it in the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, and honestly, I completely agree. Like, I do feel like that is whether that's why I'm still here or whatever, but that's what I'm feeling called to do, right? It's like I don't care about a lot of monotonous day-to-day shit. Like to me, it's
Mm-hmm.
not the point of life. And honestly, it never has been. Like even growing up, my memory of being a child is I never really cared about jobs and career and all these things. Like the hierarchy of my priority was always I want a family and I want
Mm-hmm.
to be a role model. I want to lead them. I want to teach them. That's the man I want to be. And it's all focused around time. It's all focused around people and family. And the
Mm-hmm.
rest of that shit, the shit in the world just doesn't matter. Like I don't,
No.
it's all the frills and all the stuff we need to do to live in a 3D world, but it's never been what I cared about. And so to kind of now I've reverse engineered it in terms of how I see things is okay, how do I inject these aspects of family into my day to day, whether or not I have my own like family structure, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
wife, children, etc. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
honestly one of the lenses I got into this coaching. It's like I can still implement these things that I've always felt called to. That's been my draw my entire life. But it's now
Mm-hmm.
how do I apply that outwards to just to more people? Because even with the family, I know that I would still want to just talk to more people. I want, how can I help you get over the things you're struggling with or the things that are making you feel alone in the world? Like, let's just change that. Like, what can we
Yeah.
do to shift that? Because I have felt that also my entire life. And if I can get through that and not feel it, I know that you can too, right? Because we're
Yeah.
not as unique as we think we are ever, right? There's always
Mm-hmm.
the commonalities. And so those are the threads I like to try to sew. So in any case, it's
Yeah.
interesting. Religion has always been quite, not always, especially in the last few years, it's like, what is my position with religion? And one of my perceptions, but actually it was a big point of contention with my ex-wife,
Mm-hmm.
was this idea of like religion seems like sort of offloading responsibility, right? It's
Okay.
this sense of like, I, the story in my mind is you see alcoholics or drug addicts or people who are living this sort of destructive lifestyle.
Mhm.
One day they wake up and they just change. Well, I asked God for strength because I was at the bottom, you know, I was in the worst position I ever was. I didn't believe I could carry on, so I asked God for strength. And then lo and behold, now I have this strength. I don't drink anymore. I don't do drugs. I don't do these destructive behaviors. And I attribute that to God's help. And
Mhm.
so what I don't like about that personally is there's no accountability piece to self. There's no, like, I believe you made your mind up. Like, stop being a piece of shit, be
Mhm.
better, and
Mhm.
don't just blame God. Well, he didn't help me before, but now that I've surrendered to him, now he's helping me. It's like maybe, or you just literally hit rock bottom and decided, I can't live like this because I'm going to die. And something in
Mhm.
you just shifted and now we're doing better. But that's kind of that fine line of where does that line fall for people? And I feel like there's a lack of accountability and sort of this disbelief of self. Like, oh, I couldn't do it because I don't have the strength. And so I need to pray for strength and hope that
Mhm.
God guides me to be better.
Mhm.
Like, kind of, or just fucking work to be better. Like, do something about it instead of just fucking sitting there praying all the time that something better happens, you know?
Mhm.
And so, what are your thoughts on
And
that?
I think the reality of the situation is that I think both are true. And so I think that because I have seen many people who are of faith who just pray for things to get better, and a lot of times they don't.
Surprise.
And so the way I view it is in my prayer, and let's use this as a specific example, right?
Hmm.
If they go through and it gives them this ability to retake control of their lives and then grow and get over their addiction and stuff, because addiction, you and I both know, is a fucking horrible beast.
Sure.
And many people, we had a guy that was at our old church, and because we had a house church that we went to in Ottawa, and he ended up, found God, was in not using drugs, and then he got kicked out of the church because he started using drugs again, and then he died within a year. And
Right.
so, I think it's, if we offer it up to God, I think the prayers need to be to give me the strength to figure it out. It's
Hmm.
not, I need you to give me, I can't do it on my own, because the reality of the situation is God gives you the strength to be able to do it on your own.
Hmm. And
And I
I
think a
don't
lot of
know.
people, and it's a theological question, right? It's like,
Yeah.
because at its core, what we're talking about is this concept of free will, which is almost diametrically opposed to this concept or this idea of like, there's a plan for things, right?
Right.
And I think at the end of the day, like, I think we have a path that we're being guided on. I think if we fight like hell, we can probably get off of it. But pretty consistently, we're going to be drawn back to that path.
Hmm.
And when we, you know, listen to ourselves and open ourselves up to the possibility that we might be on the wrong path, I think oftentimes we are guided back in the direction we should be. Um, but I think a lot of people, like, if that, even though from a theological perspective, it's not necessarily something that I agree with that they're doing, if it gives them, if they believe it gives them the ability to get over it, then I'm not going to be like, well, no, that's stupid. From a theological perspective, you have to view
Yeah.
it like this. It's like, I view it like, I view it as a semantical argument, right? It's like,
Hmm.
that's not, that's an interesting, it's an interesting conversation for you and I to have. But when it comes to the grand scheme of limiting or eliminating human suffering,
Yeah.
I think it's like pretty low on the list of things
Yeah.
we should,
Oh,
you know what I
100%.
mean?
And like we're talking about this in the first world countries and of course.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the day, if it is a net positive, which it is, if there's still positive change happening, I don't care how or whatever, like whatever that looks like, fine. But from the
Mm-hmm.
outside, like, or from my own life experience, it's like, I guess I would divide it into the idea of like soul or higher self versus God.
Mm-hmm.
However, that would be my definition of God versus this, monolithic, that's not the right word. You know, it's the separatism. It's the God is the ultimate and we are all the peons, which
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that either. However, I would be more fallen into the God is everything and God is the higher self. And so following that that path, that soul path, connection to God, higher self, whatever. And it's, to me, it's kind of all semantics, really, other
Mhm.
than the one part of religion that I find strange is the wars part.
Mhm.
Christianity they've all caused a lot of problems over a lot of
Yeah.
years. And so that part also doesn't make sense to me. It's like, how do you go about conquering towns and cities and countries and all these land masses in the name of God while also like murdering put you to hell?
Yeah.
So like,
And I
how do you
think,
navigate that from a church perspective where
yeah,
you're like, do as I say, not as I do, unless I tell you differently? It's like, who are you,
yeah,
God? It's like, I don't
yeah.
know about that, man.
What I would say when we talk specifically about recent history, what I would say is that the church was acting in the role of God in those circumstances, right?
Right.
So they were essentially saying, I am judge, jury, and executioner. I am going to do this. And it's like, this reminds me of or philosophical question that I've heard before, which is like, people are like, how does hunger exist in the world if we have enough food to feed everyone?
Right.
And then the question back is, well, if we have enough food to feed everyone, why are there people hungry?
Right.
And it's like, because we've chosen, right? We as a people, because of free will, have chosen
Yeah.
to do this. And so, I don't view the Inquisition, the Crusades, I don't view those things as like, oh, this is God working. I was like, these are people who,
Yeah.
in the name of something, are choosing to do this, but I don't view that as God's working. That's our working in the name of God.
Yeah. We're this plague that is the human race that's making poor decisions to kill you. Like, really, we're just all mammals, right? Like, every
Yeah.
wild animal has a structure in the wild where they kill each other for some reason. And we just
Mm-hmm.
happen to have a higher functioning brain, at least according to our, ability to tell,
Yeah.
right? To make these decisions that we can make all these crazy things to make all these significantly worse decisions on the entire population of the globe, not
Yeah.
just the humans, right? So it's interesting. Well, okay, so as a side step,
Mm-hmm.
how would you define God for yourself? Like, from,
I
like I said,
can't,
for me, it's more that spiritual
that's
side,
where it's
but
tough, right? So
yeah,
it's, it's anything and everything. It's all around us. It's everything. It's nothing at the same time. And it's almost like human language, I don't think, is sufficient to be able to describe this idea of like the eternal and the ethereal and before time and after time, and
mhm,
from the beginning of existence to now, and has existed. And it's like, my brain is not large enough, and I don't think anyone's brain is large enough to be able to make that definition.
right,
Now, how I think it's probably simpler to say, like, what would my relationship be like with God in my day-to-day life, because I think I
right,
can define that.
right. It's more
um
practically speaking.
yeah, and because I think that I just, if someone can define it, it's not me.
Mhm,
But what I would say that God does in my day-to-day life is, I'm a flawed person and I have issues just like anyone else. And, there's things that I struggle with just like anyone else. And it gives me, the Bible and having faith gives me, I think, an additional bit of strength, or an additional bit of control, or just things to be conscious of on a day-to-day basis, and a schema or a worldview with which to kind of put out there
mhm.
that is better than my life before. Not to, because I think that's like, that's kind of grotesque to like Andrew Huberman religion, but it's like
Sure.
this idea of, my life has become immeasurably better with it,
Mhm.
and I have been able to go through things that I never thought that I would be able to before. And it's been, for me, it's been a transformational experience.
Now, when you say things you couldn't have gone through before, do you mean like difficulties or struggles, or do you mean just like uh incredible, or both, really incredible experiences that you could hardly believe would be possible, but here we are?
Well, I mean, I'll give you a couple good examples. So, at my absolute lowest, we had our fucking fourth lockdown or third lockdown, whenever it was. I went on a date with Jem.
Mhm.
And there was this person who was kind to me, who was gentle, who understood the mental health struggles that I was going through because she had done her fucking clinical residency in psychology. So it's like all of these things where you're like, okay, this is something interesting.
Yeah.
And so many things lined up from the moment that we met that I was like, this is a path. We are moving forward together and this is a path and you have been put here for a reason. At that point, I wasn't open to the idea of faith. And I know Jem had been going to a house church at the time, but I wasn't really open to the idea of faith. I was kind of closed off to it. And it just got, things fell together too synchronously or
Mhm.
too incredibly for it to not. I was like, this is fucking insane. I
Yeah.
can't look at this and be like,
Disbelief.
so,
This is because I'm awesome.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, I'll give you the good example of even us moving here, right? So we go through, we decide, you know what? We don't like Canada anymore. We want to move. And the process of immigrating to another country, especially to America, as a legal immigrant, pretty
Yeah.
fucking hard.
Yeah.
And everything that went, like from our immigration perspective, everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. And we still got here way earlier than we were ever supposed to. So, good example. We go through, we finish the visa, it's ready for submission. And then you book your visa appointment at this website. And we go on the website and they're like, oh, you have an appointment date on June of 2023. And this was August of 2022. And I was like, well, this sucks. We're going to be here
Yeah.
for another winter.
Yeah.
This is fucking shit. And we prayed on it. And this is the prayer plus action thing. Every single day, Jem went on Yatri, which is that
Yeah. The
portal,
website.
and she found a visa appointment November 15th.
There it is.
I was like, holy fuck. Okay, we have a shot, right? We have a
Yeah.
shot. And so then we go and Jem has to quit at 2 clinical practices and we have to give notice at her apartment, all this crazy shit. And Jem is about to quit at her first clinic the day before we go on our honeymoon. And I get an email 15 minutes before she's supposed to quit. Your visa interview has been canceled.
Good. Yeah.
And I text her, I was like, hey, I don't know if you want to quit. We might be stuck here. Like, just so you know. And she had faith and she went in, she fucking quit anyways. And she's like, we'll figure it out.
Mhm.
And so I email my lawyer. She sends back an email the Monday of our honeymoon. We literally could not relax for the first 2 days because we're like, I could have just destroyed our fucking life. And this
Yeah.
is my fault.
Let's find
And
out.
she's like, it was a mistake. Your interview's on, no issues. It was a mistake. We're like, okay. And then
Yeah.
visa date comes, and the day before, one of the things are like, you need to bring your marriage license. And I was like, oh fuck, we drove 5 hours.
Yeah.
We don't have our marriage license. And we had let our friend stay at our apartment because he was going through a breakup with his girlfriend. And I texted him and I was like, hey, can you find our marriage license? 5 minutes later, send us a picture, printed it out. And then we go to this visa interview. First thing the lady says when we sit down with her, I don't think you qualify for this visa type. And now at this point, I've spent $12,000.
Mhm.
I have exploded our entire lives if this doesn't work out. And this lady's telling me we're not getting the fucking visa. And so I put on the most impassioned plea or understanding of, because her big gripe was, I don't think this qualifies as a reciprocal trade between the United States and Canada. And then in the kindest and gentlest way I could tell her while not screaming, I explained what our company did that was reciprocal trade between the United States and
Right.
Canada. And then she takes our passports. Every single other person that had their visa interview that day, they'd finish the interview. The person would say, congratulations, you're approved for your visa. She took our passports and she said nothing. And I was like, oh my fuck. And I emailed the lawyer and she's like, well, like, we'll see. I
Right.
was like, that's not the fucking answer I paid you $12,000 for.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we try to go out to breakfast. I can't eat. I'm so anxious. And we're driving home. And I'm like, Jem, you need to drive. I'm so stressed. I can't be awake right now. And so I just fell asleep.
Yeah.
And we
I'm
get
turning
home.
off.
Yeah. We pull in the driveway and it's a forwarded email from my immigration lawyer. And it's Kodiak Barbell is now our e-visa registered company with U.S. Department of Immigration. which means that we got the visa. And I
Yeah, you
just
got it.
started fucking bawling.
Of
I was like,
course.
oh fuck, we did it, we did it. And so that was the first part, right? The visa part. The second part was us fucking getting, right? So we
Yeah.
decided to leave Canada
Your
December
trip was
24th.
terrible.
You remember that fucking storm.
Oh yeah.
So we end up getting to the border and they're like, the border's closed. I was like, this is a country. You don't, what the fuck? And I
Doesn't
was like, and
work
I
like
know the
that.
border's not closed because Mexico exists. And I know that the border's not closed. And
Yeah.
and so we beg and plead with this guy, and he's like, get over the bridge, tell them that I sent you. You need to get off the road immediately. There's a stay-at-home order. If you get caught out, no one's coming to get you.
Right.
And then we're like, okay, so we go, we get a hotel for the night. We get up the next morning and the weather seems okay. And we get on I-85 and the weather seems okay. Not
Yeah.
plowed, but okay. Then we get to a point where they just didn't plow and there's like 2.5 feet of snow on the interstate and we've sold our winter tires. And so I'm like, holy fuck. And then someone rips through that has four-wheel drive. They immediately go into the ditch. The tow truck comes and gets them. Florida State or the New York Highway Patrol pulls them out and they start heading south. And I was like, okay, well, it's not plowed, but there's tracks.
Yeah.
We get stuck in possibly the worst whiteout conditions I've ever experienced in my life for 2 hours.
Hmm.
And Jem is like crying this entire time. I didn't know that 70 people were killed in that storm because I don't read the news.
No.
And she was checking the death toll every morning. And so she's freaking out. And we're in like whiteout conditions on summer tires. It's so bad you can't. I'm like up at the windshield and you can see maybe 15 feet from me.
Were you driving your BMW?
No, we were driving Jem's Ford Fiesta.
Okay. Even better.
And so we get to Watertown and it's like they were like, no, you can go now. Blue skies, bare roads, and we make it all the way to I think Virginia then.
Right.
Get up the next morning, get stuck in like 8 hours of traffic in the Carolinas because it goes to 2 lanes on I-95 south in the Carolinas. As we are coming over the bridge into Jacksonville on the Dames Point Bridge, the fuel pump in our car explodes and the car just shuts off in the middle of the interstate. And I was like, okay. Florida Highway Patrol pulls over. He's like, I have to get you off this bridge because you're going to be hit by another car.
Uh-huh.
Gets us off the bridge. And that is 5 minutes from where my brother lives. And he came, picked us up, emptied our car out. We left the car on the side of the road.
And it's all good.
So that fuel pump could have cut out in the fucking snowstorm.
Uh-huh.
That fuel pump cut out anywhere in the Carolinas. That fuel pump cut out 5 minutes from our fucking destination. And it was just like, by that point, I had been open to the idea. And we had gone to church before we left Canada, and we'd been baptized the week before we left. And I was like, this is not luck.
Sure.
This is not. And since then, so many things have happened. You know, so many like incredible kind of circumstances have happened where I'm like, I just need to trust that we're in the direction we're going in the direction we're supposed to be going. I need to trust that our life is going to turn out the way that it should. We are going to live our lives, you know, as Christian people. We are going to do the best to each other and to those around us. And that's it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of the times the talk around religion is all semantics, right? Because your definition to God is very much the same as mine, or like almost identical. It's just the lens of which that we see that through, or how we think about it in our, you know, peon minds day to day.
Yeah.
It's just like, does it really fucking make any difference if we're all out here trying to be better people, trying to help other people, you know, make the world a better place? All the like, it's, and I think that's the unfortunate part of religion is that it does, in my view, it has a bad lens or a bad rap because it's like you're either you believe or you don't, or if you don't go to church, then this, or if you know, these other sort of connotations that I have myself, which are probably just, you know, biases, of course, but it's like, well, honestly, and that goes into another question I had about politics too, but I think that a lot of the time it's just like a you versus us mentality. And that's
not how it should be. That's not at all how it should be.
me, and that's it. And that's why I just like
Yeah.
it's similar to like the parent or like the family stuff and whatever. It's like it's not what life is all about. You know, why are we arguing about this bullshit? It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. right?
None of it matters.
No, because because it doesn't. It's like,
Yeah.
if we're both being good people, I don't need to know what you think about all the time. I don't want to
Mhm.
know. It's none of my business.
Yeah.
Plus, we're all fucking weirdos anyway. So, you know, but this is a purely curiosity question that I've had with a couple of people who are also
Mhm.
religious and stuff. But what are your thoughts on religion as one of or the earliest form of government in the context of creating a hierarchy of control, where you have this, say, the church, these
Mhm.
rules apply to you, or let's rewind it one more step. Let's say you have a group of people who wants to have some sort of uh, authoritative structure over top of another group of people. Say, how can we go about this? Well, we
Mhm.
tell them if they don't believe in God, they're going to go to hell. So what's hell? Well, it's the worst thing you could ever imagine, right? Forever. Like, oh, that's
Yeah.
good, right? That's a great idea. And then, well, how do
Yeah.
they tell us that they believe? Well, they give us money or their goats or whatever it is, and then we have all of their stuff that we want that we don't want to work for. That's a great idea. You stand on that box over there, tell them they're going to go to hell if they don't give you their goat, for example.
Yeah.
Right. And so then you get people to buy in and think, oh, I don't want to go to hell, so I better listen to you. And now you
Yeah.
have these people over years and years and years who can potentially write these stories or write these books and put them together over time, right?
Mhm.
Which maybe they're the same people that they're talked about in the Bible. I don't know. But like, to me, that also seems feasible because the government, to me, is generally about how do we create a you versus them, not versus us mentality, which is why I
Mhm.
don't like politics in North America. It's because it's like this option one or option two mentality. And if you like one, then you're going to fight with the other one. It's like, why don't we just fight with the government? Because we're supposed to be the ones ruling them, not the other way
Yeah.
around. But we're too fucking busy saying, oh, you're a conservative or you're a liberal or this. It's like, shut the fuck up. Pay attention to the government. They're screwing everybody and they're trying
Yeah.
to get us to fight, right? Which is
Yeah.
to me very similar to religion in a lot of ways. It's like, don't get them mad at the church, get them mad at other people,
Mhm.
right?
And the
So,
reality that and it's that's a so it's interesting, right? Because we've seen the same hierarchical structure repeated through human history,
right,
initially with the church, and then it's also very, very important too. When we place Jesus historically within, the society that he lived, why was Jesus a big part of the reason why was Jesus killed?
I don't know.
Because he was a very inconvenient person for the Roman emperor,
Oh, sure,
because he was essentially saying, hey, you know what, he doesn't have the authority, my dad has the authority,
sure,
and we're all supposed to live a pious and devout life, and we are like all and we're
yeah,
not giving all of our money away, right? Because Jesus went to the temple, flipped over the table of the money lenders, right? There
right,
was all of these things where it was like, and Jesus's friends, right, his apostles were the lowest of the low, right? Mary Magdalene was a hooker, right? And so all of, is a fisherman, and John the Baptist and all these people, and it's like they were not rich, powerful people. They
right,
were in direct opposition to rich and powerful people. And there's this book by Reza Aslan called Zealot, and he places Jesus historically, and essentially they were religious radicals, and they
mm,
were very, very inconvenient to the ruling class at the time. So Jesus was killed,
right,
and it was a politically motivated murder.
sure,
And what we come to realize too over the course of human history, uh, I think what I can comfortably say is pretty much all of the great human atrocities, or I would probably argue all that have happened, is humanity's attempt to play God as opposed to being subservient to God, right? So you think about the
yes,
early church.
hmm,
They were quite devout, pious people. They were good people. And then it turned into the Holy Roman Empire. And then the Holy Roman Emperor became God,
right,
right? And so then it's humans playing God. We're playing God. And then if you think about the Crusades, the Spanish Inquisition, all of this stuff, right? The Catholic Church was playing God. And then what happens in the Protestant Reformation is Martin Luther says, this is fucked. This
yeah,
is not how it's all supposed to be. You're not supposed to give all your fucking money. They do not have the ultimate authority. The Bible has the ultimate authority, and these people are thieves.
hmm,
And that's what kicked off the Protestant Reformation. And then what starts to happen in the late 1800s, early 1900s is these societies have just replaced God with another power structure with the government at the top, right? If you
Right.
think about the Soviet Empire, it was illegal to be religious and they worshiped the state.
Hmm.
And so the state was acting as God. And so all as far as I can tell, all of human existence has been the horrible story of us trying to replace God with something else.
Totally. And that's, I mean, ultimately, it's the exact same today, right? It's the how can we remain control over the masses so that they don't fight against us.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is the news, which is as you, and that's one of the reasons that, or one of the things that we see very similarly too. It's like the news is all bullshit. It's all
Yep.
just like fear mongering and all this stuff. It's like if it's on the news, it's for a reason, and it's not a reason that you should really be concerned about, generally speaking, right? It's like what else is happening in the big picture here, and
Mm-hmm.
why are we not focused on the people who are telling us to focus not on this, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and then there's the whole, I don't know my thoughts on like people who say I'm not into politics. And so, like, and that's a privileged thing to be able to say, which,
Mm-hmm.
yes, I agree. However, like the other side of that coin is it's kind of like it feels kind of conceited as well. Like, well, it must be nice not to have to think about politics. It's like, yes. However, the language, or that's where the semantics comes back into play for me. It's like I don't think we have the same view of politics because I will gladly talk politics. What I won't do is talk about how this party is better than this party or this party is a piece of shit because of this. It's
Yeah.
like to me, the party system is broken. I don't have a better
Yeah.
alternative. However, I'm not talking about, well, I like that the NDP does this or they do like it's not the fucking point because it's all you're looking at the ground, look up at the fucking sky for a second and realize
Yeah.
that this is not the problem.
Yeah. Well, and it's people always ask me my opinion or like where I am on the spectrum politically.
Sure.
And my response for the last probably 9 months has been the exact same, which is if voting worked, they wouldn't let us do it.
100 exactly. Exactly.
So I don't care.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's not that I don't care about the political structure, but it comes down very practically to me, what am I going to do about it? It's the same as anything globally at all. Is it important for somebody? Yes. It's not important for me because of what I know to be true for me, even to go back to like our conversation before we started recording, but like if I put the energy from me into that, i.e., global politics or global events or any of that stuff, the version of me that I have available left for the people that are actually in my life day to day is just a shadow of a man. I don't have
Yeah.
the energy capacity because energy is a finite resource, and I'm not going to resource my energy outwardly to things that I can't do anything about directly when the alternative is focus my energy into the people around me to make literally the world around me a better place. And then the
Mm-hmm.
world that they are then operating in also a better place. And that to me, it's like, how do we impact the world? We impact the world, which even to go back to our like God and religion, by being the best version of ourselves that we can be, by trying to help our fellow man or people, by trying to lift each other up and just be and do better. Right. And that to me is always worth focusing energy towards versus like how do I change the structure of the political system in a continent. It's like that is somebody's problem if they want it to be. That is not my problem because
Yes.
it'll put me to the grave and like that's not my hill to die on. I hope that it is
Yeah.
somebody's and it's not mine. I would rather try to
Mhm.
lift you up and help you through your shit in your day to day, and then you have a better day and so do I. Let's
Yeah.
just do that as many times as possible until forever because we're all dying sometime.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I love it. And so what, anyways, that's the fun, right? It's like, sure, we want to talk semantics. As you said too, words to me are this comical tool that we have to try to describe things. And it's never going to be adequate.
No.
Like no matter whatever words I know will never communicate what's in my mind into your mind the same way that it's in mine, right? So it's just like we're going to take our best shot every single day, all the time. We're going to use these words to try to communicate so that we get along and try to like do better and whatever.
Hmm.
To tie back into marriage, i.e., my next question,
Hmm.
in what ways has becoming a husband been a transformative experience? I would say collectively, but also separately from religion. It sounds like they both kind of happen at similar timelines.
Yeah. I mean, I think so. It's also like, to give you my opinion on marriage too, is like, I find it increasingly odd that people who are not religious get married because at the end of the day, common law exists in Canada and
Yeah,
marriage is a religious construct.
right.
So it's like, if if you just want to be together, then common law exists. But you're using this like specifically, it's a religious ceremony, right?
Hmm.
And that's why they always use the Bible when they're doing the vows, right? And I think for me, it is the first time in my life um, where I realized that I needed to focus on someone other than myself,
Mm.
and that my life got better when I served others. And it was, and it's incredible too. Like the more energy I put into my wife, the more energy I put into our relationship, the more energy I put into our life here, the better everything gets. And
Right.
it's almost like the less selfish you are, the better things are. And I think there's this um, line in the Bible that says, "Husbands, love and adore your wives the same way Christ loved the church,"
Hmm.
which is the church was the lasting effort of Jesus Christ dying on the cross, right? That's what resulted. So,
Right.
you know, he believes that, salvation comes through acceptance of God and Jesus Christ, then he would love that more than anything because it gives people the ability to change their lives
Yeah,
dramatically. And
withstand the storm, so to speak.
Mhm. And so, and I love too, the church that we go to is very, very pro marriage, very marriage driven. And we've had multiple sermons on marriage. And every time I learn that it's just like you have to be, it's what's one of the things they say is don't be quick to anger, right?
Yeah.
Be quick to love, slow to anger. And just all of my natural tendencies or inclinations are challenged in marriage because I can't be a selfish person, because I can't be an angry person, because I can't be a self-centered person, because I can't just fly off the handle.
Hmm.
And so for me, I view marriage and religion as,
One of the
and
same.
they
Yeah,
reinforce each other. And it's
interesting.
I personally believe that um marriage is for the betterment of man, and it's a I'm a fucking huge marriage guy, super pro marriage. I think it's one of the most incredible things that you can do with another human being.
Right.
And I like when I see people, they're going through that phase of, dating all these girls and sleeping around, and I'm like, you could just pick the one you like. You can just be with them forever. You can do that. You can just choose to do that.
Right.
And it's fucking great because you get to spend the rest of your life with the person you love most.
Hmm.
It's fantastic. And it's the amount of personal growth that I have undergone with the help of Gem and because of Gem. If I look at my last 12 months of personal growth versus the 5 years prior to that, I've probably grown more in the last year than I have in the past five.
Sure.
And it's because of her support and her love and the fact that we have this union of, no matter how bad things get, I'm not running away.
Hmm.
No matter how ugly and how angry we get, we're still there. And sometimes it's going to be hard, but we've chosen to do this.
Yeah. I wonder, like, for myself,
Mm-hmm.
largely relationships for me are one of the appealing things, right? Because obviously, not obviously, I guess, but for me, the conversations aren't intimidating, and the version of me who I become when I hear things that I maybe didn't want to hear it doesn't change that much. I take bad news pretty well, and like
Hmm.
that's flying off the handle isn't the thing that I really worry about too much anymore.
Hmm.
But the thing that I really do almost long for in a relationship is that belief from someone else. And as you said about Jem, she's in your corner. She believes in you. She sees parts of you and sees versions of you that you don't even know exist yet. And
Yeah.
that belief in itself is very empowering and energizing day to day, right? It's that, oh, you see something in me that I don't, or maybe that I don't as much. And that drives me to want to see it and become it as well. And that's
Hmm.
like, you can't, recreate that dynamic or that feeling anywhere else. And
No.
so, yeah, I mean, I'm also a pro marriage guy ultimately, but
Yeah.
ultimately, whether it's marriage or just the long term thing, I don't know. I don't have a strong stance on that, I guess, either. But that feeling, what are your thoughts on that? It's that belief, or that's my perception of it's the belief of someone else in the day to day when you're like doubting yourself or keeping you on the path almost. It's that accountability too. It's like I need to be the best version of me and make a better decision because one, I want to do it for me and also for them. And I don't want to misrepresent either of us right now.
Well, and also it's it has this powerfully transformative character because you are with this you on the good side is you're with this person for the rest of your life,
Right.
and it can also feel very trapped because you're with this person for the rest of your life, so you have to make it work, and
Yeah.
you have to work on the parts of yourself that everyone else you could just say, hit the fucking bricks, I'm done.
Yeah. No
You
thanks.
can't do that, right? And
Yep.
it's yeah, I think it's what did they say? It's Timothy Keller, I think, said marriage is I will become many different men over the course of my life, and Jem will become many different women over the course of her life. And marriage is the promise that every year, without fail, I will still be your husband and you will still be my wife.
Mhm.
And it's like we're going to grow, and we're going to grow differently, and we're going to, priorities are going to change, everything's going to change, there's going to be kids, all this stuff, and it's like we're still married and through all that.
Mhm.
And it's this connecting thread that I think gives it the power. Because, and I'm sure you've noticed this, like, how long have your parents been together?
Yeah. I think 40 years.
Dude, and they're like, right? It's like when you're with someone for 40 fucking years, like that's like incredible. But when you and it's always very, very interesting too. Like when you see couples that have been together for a really, really long time, they're just like everything they do is because of the other person, right? It's like, well, your father likes this. Oh, your mother likes this. Well, I get these things for your mother. I do
Right.
this stuff for your father. And it's like that service is not a conscious thing anymore. It's just how they are. And it transforms people, I think, for the better. And I just like I love seeing couples that have been together for a really long time and married for a really long time because I'm
Mhm.
like, this is fucking like because you see how much better they get the longer they're together, and you're like, holy fuck.
Well, just as you're saying too, it's the reprogramming your subconscious mind to not be as selfish.
Yeah.
Right? It's like I'm thinking about them. It's like, oh, they like this, so I'll do this. Or instead of like, well, what do I want to do? Although, yeah, I will say too, I think that a lot of the generation before us, it's just a different a lens on relationships in general.
Yeah.
This we're very much in our heads right now, I would say, like in terms of even diagnosing things, right? There, everything's got a label, everything's got a name, and if you're and not to minimize the true negative things in the world like narcissism and abuse and all these things. However, you rewind a generation and it's a much different lens. Like those terms didn't exist,
No.
right? You went through it because now you're in it. And like, is
Yeah.
that perfect? No. But like the perception of a way out, I would say is a relatively new thing.
Because if you can leave, then it's not marriage.
Right. Sure.
Because then it's just a long-term relationship where I have bet you half of my shit, I'll love you forever.
Right.
And what I have also noticed is the couples that, and this is where it gets very interesting from a marriage perspective and a religion perspective. So I think they say what average divorce rate now is 48%.
Yeah.
Do you know what the divorce rate amongst couples that identify as religious is?
No,
It's like 10%. Do you know what the divorce rate of couples who pray together daily is?
probably less.
1 in 1152.
Right.
So it's like 0.000 whatever percent. And so, interestingly enough, and seemingly enough, the more Christ centered they call it, or religion
Yeah,
centered
yeah.
a marriage becomes, seemingly because they understand that suffering is a bygone or foregone conclusion of human existence. I offer up my suffering, so that I can help others.
Hmm.
And if you view marriage through that lens, you can bear all of those difficulties. But when we extract that religious component from marriage, then it quickly becomes this contract where I bet you half my shit, I'll love you forever. And you know what? I'm okay with losing half my shit because I don't want to change.
Yeah, I can just get new shit.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay, do you have any advice for even people, or I would say men just being men in the world today, like to yourself 3 years ago or however many years ago,
Mhm.
to change your daily habits or to get out of that cycle of, not to say negative decisions, but just different decisions than you would make now today, right? Do you see a path from who you were to who you are in terms of tangible changes or tangible decisions or advice? You know what I mean? Like, how do I stop being a
Yeah.
piece of
And
shit or a degenerate in the world so that I can
mhm.
better myself and the world around me better?
Yeah. And I think for me, like a lot of it came from, probably November, December 2020. I'm pretty consistent or pretty comfortable in saying that, like, that's probably the version of myself I've liked the least, right? I
Right.
was a very self-centered, very egotistical, very ego-driven person. And I saw the depths to which my psyche can go, into how miserable I can be, into how selfish I can be, and toxic and narcissistic, and all of those horrible things that you can think of. And I was like, okay, well, I can't do that ever again,
Yeah.
because I could not live with myself when I came down from that period of time because I was manic. When I finally came down, I realized I was so ashamed of what I'd done, and I was so ashamed of the person that I'd been. I was like, well, I could just kill myself, and then I wouldn't have to deal with this guilt. And
Yeah.
then, by the grace of God, I didn't. And I had to go through this long process of, like, it was pretty easy for me to have that path because it was like, well, I can just start by never doing that again.
Hmm.
Because I realized that made me miserable and it made me want to kill myself. And I fucking hated who I was. And so, what did that look like? Well, I knew that sexual promiscuity wasn't the answer because that made me really fucking miserable and really unhappy.
Yeah.
And I knew that using other people for my gain made me really miserable and really unhappy. So, I'm just going to stop doing those two things. And then, you know, I realized that my anger was just disguising these other emotions, right?
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
had an angry response to things because it was covering up for anxiety or grief or something else. But it was just coming through as anger because that's all how I knew how to integrate with the world outside.
Hmm.
So then I was like, okay, well, I can't do that. So I guess I have to figure out how to actually have emotions.
Hmm.
And, I think the path where I started from and where I am now, like, I wish I could go back 4 years ago and tell myself, you know, if you don't keep an eye on it every single day, you have the capacity to turn into probably the person that you hate most.
Hmm.
And this is going to be a lifelong battle. This is going to be a lifelong struggle. But if you focus on yourself, focus on actually building relationships, and focus on actually figuring out your emotions, and focus on just not doing the things that are easy, right? Because it's easy to use people, right?
Yeah.
Because you get something, and it's
Especially when you're
easy.
smart too. Like when you have a degree of intelligence, people are fucking easy to figure out. They just are, you know?
You just tell them what they want to hear, and it's
Yeah.
and then you start to realize you're like, okay, well, maybe some people can exist or live their life like this, but
Hmm.
I fucking can't. And I just realized I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to start by doing the opposite of what I did. And then I got happier. And then I doubled down on that. And then I got happier still. And then we decided to get married. And I got happier still.
Hmm.
And I was like, well, maybe there's something to this, like not just giving into the ease of the world, not just
Right.
giving into what feels good in the moment. Because I think there's this almost masturbatory nature or like so selfish nature of the modern human where everything's about me. my feelings, my emotions, how I like what, speak my truth, that kind of
Yeah.
bullshit. And it's like, you can justify a lot of really horrible fucking behavior by doing that.
Hmm.
And it's like, I just realized I was like, I can't live my life like that anymore. I need to stop that. And I need to start to do the opposite.
Yeah. And it's funny, like different language, but same message to me. Be the man I admire is the middle of my whiteboard on my wall. It's been there for months. And that's
Yeah.
just, I am the problem. I am the solution. Be the man that I admire. Those are like my daily reminders to myself. Don't be a fucking degenerate and try to be a better version of me today than I was yesterday. Hopefully yesterday I was still a good version of me, but there's always a better
Mhm.
one, right? So just
Yeah.
aim for that. Aim up. Jordan Peterson, aim up, right? It's like it's not complex shit, but it's just that reminder that I think a lot of people don't think about or don't care about, or I don't know if they don't have the awareness at all, but it's just it's not there at a societal level, and it's so, I mean, it's too bad.
Yeah. Because it, like had I had, and I was very grateful to, and when we speak about God working in our lives, good example. Jem had just left probably the worst relationship in her entire life. And then she moved in across the street from a pastor
Right.
who had a house church for drug addicted and homeless people. And she did a Bible study with him, and he talked to her about this concept of grace, which is forgiveness for those who don't deserve it. And that helped her work through the things that she did. And I was like,
Sure.
God worked in her life at her absolute lowest to put her living next door to probably the person that could help her most at that moment. And she grew and she changed, and she's a fundamentally different person than when we first started dating. I'm a fundamentally different person than when we first started dating, and we are both light years ahead of where we were.
Right. Ultimately,
And
it's
it's
exponential growth patterns.
yeah, and it's and I think that's also the another beautiful thing about marriage too is if you see your partner really really trying, it takes a very selfish person to be like, I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm good how I am actually, so you go be better. Like,
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And it's no, it's a fucking trip, even thinking about it.
So to kind of wrap things up, the question I have on mine, or and really it's in theme too. They say that what has got you where you are isn't what's going to get you where you're going.
Mhm.
And with that in mind, I'd love to hear about how your internal dialogue has been shifting lately, and then how you see it shaping as you move forward into this next chapter of your life.
Yeah, and I think for me, the thing that I've struggled with most my entire life has been this idea of like interfacing with the world just through anger.
Right.
And when I was younger, in many ways, that kind of emotion kept me safe and played a lot of really important roles. But as I'm growing older, I'm realizing that if my purpose in life is to help others, that engaging that anger is diametrically opposed to that. It's the opposite.
Hmm.
And I think for men, probably the easiest way to think about it is we're all conscious of our shortcomings or our difficulties. And I think if you ask someone, hey, what do you think is your biggest impediment to pushing your gift out to the world? They would know pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And I think the answer to that is just stop doing that. Just fix that. Just focus on fixing that thing.
Right.
Fix your biggest fucking obstacle. And everything kind of falls into place once you start to do that work. And then you start to realize that it gets easier and easier once you just relinquish that part of yourself. And I think
Right.
so many people, because the prospect of starting is so terrifying, they just never start, or they just deny or ignore or just pretend
Or numb, right? It's
or
I'll just
numb.
continue on the substances and whatever, the drugs, promiscuity, any of those things, insert vice. I'm going to do all these
Yeah.
things so I don't have to think about it. Sure.
Yeah.
And or I'm going to talk about politics and religion all the time so I don't have to focus on the problems that I have in my own life that I don't want to fix,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all the same shit, right? It's
It
distraction.
is. It is. It's focusing on not being a better person, which is too bad. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know what? I think what a lot of young men, really need is, a good group of people who are kind of self-actualized and have kind of done that work. And
Yeah.
I've been very lucky to fall into a group like that. And I think a lot of people, I mean, they'll go through their entire life not knowing what their purpose is. And it's
Mhm.
like you got to find that out early, and you got to find out what those impediments are, and you got to start to eliminate those impediments, and then you got to start to work to actually have your life's purpose. Because when you do that, when it's aligned, it's like, dude, I have taken 1 week off of work, and it wasn't off of work because I still responded to clients first thing in the morning
Right.
since May 2020. And that was our honeymoon.
Right.
Oh, and then I took 1 day off when we got married.
Hmm.
I've taken 8 days of less work in almost 4 years.
Right. And all
And
of your
it's because
clients are better, all you are better, everything's life is just
because
better.
it's my purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I to kind of switch the table real quick, I'm starting on the 15th of this month a local group at a coffee shop for literally that exact purpose. I want to have a an idea sharing, basically, where are you stuck in your life, and how can
Mhm.
we, i.e., this room, someone in this room, how can we help each other move forward? Right? I
Mhm.
don't want to be stuck on the same thing 6 months from now as I am now, and I don't want any of you to be either. So let's just
Yeah.
all not do that. And I'm going
Yeah.
to facilitate. I'm starting in whatever that is, a week and a half. I'm going to do that a
Yeah.
monthly meetup locally to try and do that exact intention. Right? Let's just be better, do better, lead by example, and just have an accountability group that like, let's just bring up the community around us.
Mhm.
Yeah, find
Dude,
our
that's
purpose
sad.
and do it, right? Like share our
Yeah.
gifts. And
Mhm.
fortunately for both of us, coaching is one of our gifts. Like, how do we help people or talk to people through hard stuff? Well,
Yeah.
I don't know. Just goes well generally, so that's good. Let's do more of
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah. Do you have anything left you want to talk about or share?
Oh, because one of the questions that you had was the really old people in the Bible.
Oh yeah, right. Adam,
Yeah.
he's like 930 years old. How do
Okay.
you explain that?
So this is very interesting because you have to also place it within the context of when the Old Testament was written. Because these people, the really old people, only exist in the Old Testament, right? They don't really exist
Yeah,
in the New Testament.
right.
Jesus died at 33.
Yeah,
So
I mean, he didn't little different life path.
and but it's also important to place it contextually within. So the Old Testament takes place principally in the Fertile Crescent, right, which is like uh, Israel, Iraq, Iran, kind of that area.
Right.
So one of the first civilizations in history was Sumeria, which is in modern day Iraq. If you go back and you look at Sumerians and Mesopotamians, they always a historical kind of undercurrent or narrative with those people is they would always, when they were trying to give deference to a king, they would say that. So there's a Mesopotamian king. I can't remember what the hell his name is. He apparently lived for 28,000 years
Oh well.
because they were saying so for them age was a analog or an explanation for a person's importance.
Right.
So if Adam lives 900 years, that's a very important person.
Hmm.
Methuselah lived, whatever, that's a very important person. And so when we take it literally, it doesn't really make sense. But when we place it contextually within where the Old Testament was written and what the cultural norms were at the time, it starts to make more sense.
Sure. Well, and I wonder too if they just measured years differently. Like if they didn't have a calendar year the same as ours, and so maybe, full moons were a year or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and it's also the second thing with that too is Mesopotamians and Sumerians had a different way of counting.
Sure. Which is
So for
another, yeah,
them,
exactly. Sure.
right? So it's like all of this stuff ends up like really wishy-washy because you start to realize that there are ideas or constructs that existed in Sumerian or Mesopotamian culture or in culture of the Old Testament that we don't that are not part of our culture anymore. The way that they measure time, right? The way that they measure people's importance, all these things are fundamentally different than they were 3,000 years ago.
Hmm.
So it's kind of like trying to read it through like really like if you were wearing glasses but you hadn't cleaned them ever, it doesn't really make sense. And so you have to go back to 3,000 years ago and you have to start to say, okay, well, if we place it historically, what did all their cultures do? Well, they also made a lot of deference or gave a lot of deference to people if they were old.
Right.
So how do we, using this, you know, new scope, still place it contextually so that the people who were reading the Old Testament at the time understood it? So they
Right.
read, okay, well, well,
at
Adam's
the
this
time it
old,
was written.
he's an important person.
Right.
And then we've lost a lot of that knowledge over time. And then you go back and you read the Old Testament, and you're like, what the fuck?
Right. Well, and they talk about, I don't remember what it is, but basically like Adam was son of these three people. They all lived these many years. Who were the fathers of these people? And they all lived these many years. There's this whole chunk of the Old
Yeah.
Testament, which is talking about this dude had these kids, and then this dude had these kids, and then his wife had, it's like, why does that matter? Right. But through the lens of what you're saying, the years are what signifies their importance before it gets into the stories about them.
Mm-hmm.
It's context, right? It's like this is why you care about who these people were. They lived to
Mm-hmm.
be 900. Oh, now I'm just like, this is all bullshit. Like people don't live
Yeah.
that long, or we're just all full of chemicals and they used to live that long. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
And it's when you start to view it like that, you're like, oh, that makes a little bit more sense, right? They're trying
totally.
to place them, they're trying to place them as powerful and important people within this narrative that they've crafted.
Yeah,
And it's also important too, because it's very interesting in Jewish culture. They can trace back their lineage thousands of years.
sure.
And they can trace a lot of these people can trace back their lineage to like 4,000 or 3,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. And so a lot of that stuff in the Old Testament is also like that's just how they interface with the world, is like a huge part of Jewish culture. Because remember, all the people in the Old Testament and even Jesus and his followers were Jewish.
Yeah,
So from a Jewish cultural perspective, lineage and genealogy is a very, very, very important part of it. So when you place it contextually, you're like, oh, okay, I understand why they spent 10 chapters doing that.
yeah. Well, that was my approach to try to get a better understanding or viewpoint on the Bible myself, was to at least read some of it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm going through from this like definitely biased lens of like, I don't know if this makes sense to me, but I'm going to give it a shot to see,
Yeah.
like, convert me, Bible. Just
Yeah.
please do. I'm open. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why this is written like this. However, that's very helpful. And just to say, it's not necessarily to take it literally right now because it's written for people 3,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, so that they would read it and believe it versus me, who's very much extracted from that culture and that timeline.
And the Old Testament is really um, God, man's existence trying to be subservient to God while still dealing with while still dealing with the consequence of original sin, which is eating from the tree of knowledge
Yeah,
of
the
good and
apple.
evil,
Yeah.
right? And so we had all of these really, like when you look at the things that they made them do, right? Like all of these, what we now know as like rabbinic dietary law, right? So like
Hmm.
kosher and stuff, that was all Old Testament stuff. But when you look at, for instance, like people getting circumcised, that was all Old Testament stuff, right? These were all things we were essentially atoning for that original sin.
Right.
And then what turns it into Christianity is the coming of Jesus Christ, and then he dies on the cross for all of our collective sins, including original sin, which is why
Yeah.
Christians don't eat kosher, Christians don't circumcise themselves. And so it's like,
Clean slate.
what I would say is if you start with the Old Testament, it's a hard sell.
Yeah.
It's a hard sell. If
Well,
you start with the New Testament,
yeah.
it's a little easier.
Well, I gave up. I'm like, I got this thing. I'm not going to continue because I have now decided I'd rather just, and this honestly, it's how I'd rather do most things. I want to talk to somebody who is living this life, who lives and knows more about it than I do, versus
Mm-hmm.
reading a thing, even though that is, I do find that to be a valuable piece. I would rather gain context and then lenses of which to see it through in the first place, i.e., how am I supposed to read this? Because it doesn't make any fucking sense right now.
Yeah, and it
And here we
doesn't.
are.
And I have an undergraduate's degree worth of context, which is
Yeah,
why for me, I'm like, I read it, I'm like, I get why they're doing this. I
sure.
understand this. But it's like if you don't have that, like people also have to be conscious of the fact that like the pastor at our church has a doctorate in divinity, which means that he did an undergraduate, a master's, and then a doctorate in the Bible.
Yeah, yeah,
That's how complicated it is.
right.
And it's like, you know, I've done Bible study. I have an undergraduate degree in it, and there's still sometimes where I'm like, I have to talk to my pastor, or I have to message someone who knows more than me. And I have to talk to my mom a lot of the time, be like,
Yeah.
can you help me understand this? Because it's a heavy book.
Mhm. Well, that's it. That's why largely why it's super intriguing to me. I like that aspect and that I would like to know about this heavy book. I love that
Yeah,
shit. But
yeah,
I also need to know how I'm supposed to read it so that I cannot read it through this biased lens that I'm seeing it through right now.
yeah.
And so that's anyway, largely, not largely, one reason why I appreciate you as a human in general. And I don't even know how long, many years we've known each other, but close to a decade probably now. Eight,
It'll
nine.
be it'll be 8 years, June 16th.
Oh, did we meet at that meet?
Yeah.
That was a
We had
powerhouse of
talked on
me.
Instagram before, but we met
Yeah,
in
yeah,
person because you
yeah,
were eating McDoubles. And I was like, hell yeah.
yeah. I brought Pop Tarts from the States for Witzel.
Yes, I remember that.
He's still pumped about that. It's awesome. Um, all right. I appreciate you coming on.
Of
Where
course.
can people get a hold of you? You're a strength coach. Are you taking on
Yeah.
clients? Talk about that for a second.
Yeah. So people can find me, Stu underscore Kodiak Barbell on Instagram. Don't add me on Facebook because I will not accept you because I post things there that will get me canceled. Um, Uh, I am not currently taking on clients. We are taking on clients as a company through Kodiak. So if you have any interest about any of those sorts of things, you can always reach out to me. I'll send you over kind of intake forms, and then we figure out based on the coaches we have which one kind of fits best with you from a psychological perspective. So, um, yeah, you can find me on Instagram. That's really the only social media I have because I hate
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. It's just a necessary evil to participate in the online business space of today, or especially in
Exactly,
strengths. Strength is kind of that seems to be the primary location anyways.
100%.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you taking the time and it's been a great conversation, man. Thank you.
Dude, of course. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, man. We'll see you.